So you're either going to love the Carmen or you're gonna be like, why does it come with a $2 pouch? It's gonna be a pretty decisive set with some questionable unit variations, but based off of my unit, my graph, I like the Carmens more than my original EJ07. Because when an IEM is this good, I really don't care if they gave me a $2 pouch or it comes in a plastic bag.
I get the worst cup holders, but who cares? I can buy better ones. And there's no storage space anywhere. But who cares?
Now, I'm not justifying Yanyin's pouch decision because that's actually insane for a $850 IEM, but really, when the sound is this good, who cares? What makes the Carmen unique and stand out to me are 4 things: the vocals, the scaling, the imaging, and the mid bass. These are a high volume set. If you listen at mid to lower volumes, don't even look at this, just go get the Estrella or something, because the Carmen needs volume. I'm using the Topping G5 as my source, which is more than enough. They're fairly easy to drive actually, and this is a blast your brains out kind of set, like the original EJ07s and the original Dark Magicians. Now, the mid bass. It's around the same as the Monarch Mk3s when it comes to the overall mid bass quality, with the main difference being that the Carmen is quicker and sharper and a little bit tighter in the mid bass, while the Monarch Mk3s slams harder and feels fuller, which the Carmen is achieving with Noel's BAs and some sort of like new crossover that they're using. All I know is that it has 8 crossovers. I mean, it does seem to be working. The presentation to the mid bass has this quickness in its attack and decay, and it also has enough impact to follow it up, which gives you this textured but tight and well controlled like mid bass experience. The attack is pretty sharp, and the low end separation and layering overall is quote unquote endgame level, and you also get enough impact to be satisfied. Obviously, the Carmen doesn't slam like a monster. You're not gonna get an overwhelming amount of low end like the Fat Freak stuff or even the Estrella, since this isn't a bass head set or even like a bassy set in general. It's just very good mid-bass quality. The low end isn't going to sound pillowy or light or low res because the resolution in the bass notes are actually pretty clear. Kick drums and bass strings feel sharp in its attack, and the clarity of the bass notes is better versus something like the high 4s. Sub bass wise, it's enough. You get the rumble, it's quick, it's tightly controlled with good extension like all the way down, but it's not going to like shake or vibrate your brains out even at high volumes. The Carmen is more of a surgical bass set with how sharp and fast the bass notes and the separation is, if that makes sense. It's just more technical in the low end. But low end aside, the imaging also plays a role in making the mid bass as good as it is when it comes to how sharp the attack is. Again, it's accurate, it's pinpoint imaging. You can locate the directional cues and like positions of the instruments very clearly, very accurately, and most impressively, the Carmen is one of the few IEMs that does like center imaging, or at least as close as center imaging as you're gonna get in an IEM. This is even more obvious when it comes to the vocals. Like the artist is literally centered in front of you, whereas on a lot of other IEMs, the vocals are kind of like floating or spread out on the left and right side. It's still kind of centered, but they're more like spread out on the left and right sides. So the center imaging of the vocals combined with the scaling makes the Carmen one of the best vocals I've heard once you crank these up. Again, at mid to lower volumes, do not get these. They will sound too dark. However, once you give it enough power or volume, again, it's not very hard to drive. The Carmen opens right up, powerful, extended, full in the vocals, and you hear all these small details and the bite when it comes to like the consonants, like without it being like overbearing and just too like fatiguing. Again, insane scaling. The vocals and the mids are able to scale like crazy because the treble is very tame. If you're looking for splashy cymbals or like airy nuanced decays in like the end notes or an energetic presentation, then go look somewhere else. Try something like the Crimson or even the Estrella would be better, because these are just like a lot darker, because the treble is more of an afterthought in the background that doesn't get in the way of the vocals because the vocal scaling is the main focus. But this darker treble does hurt the Carmen's overall detail retrieval a bit. There's obviously some masking over the treble from the vocals because it's just pushed more, right? It's pushed more in front of you. But in terms of the low end, the mids, the vocals, it's quote unquote end game like resolution detail. It's very good, but the trade-off is that you're not gonna hear much of the treble detail. So if you like treble, if you like air, you like that like sizzliness, spiciness, look for a different set. This is made for an entirely different demographic. But in terms of imaging, layering, separation, and low end texture, the Carmen is around the same as the Monarchs, with the main difference being that the Monarchs just have more air to the sound. It has more treble detail, while the Carmen is better in the vocals and the scaling. The Carmen is an RS5 that actually scales. Very similar vocal presentation and tonality, but it's just a high volume version of the RS5. Like if you want to crank up your RS5, you really can't do that because it's gonna blast your ears out. It just has too much upper mids and the vocals are too forward at high volumes because it's made for like mid volume listening, right? So if you're trying to crank up the RS5, it's gonna sound like way too shouty, way too fatiguing, whereas the Carmen fixes that by taming the whole thing down. You know, the upper mids are tamed down, the treble is tamed down, and allows the vocals to really scale, making them way more immersive. It's almost like you're literally inside the singer's head. Like it feels like the vocals are shooting out. At higher volumes, the Carmen eats up genres like acoustic, mando pop, vocal ballads, indie, lo-fi, ambient, even deep cuts or, you know, slower quote-unquote sad songs from pop and rock artists as well. As long as the song is not overly produced and not like super energetic, then the Carmen will be able to scale it pretty well. But it's definitely not an all-rounder set, you know, not a safe pick by any means. Very niche. The Carmen is actually pretty picky when it comes to the tracks, but once it picks the right one, like once it hits, oh, it freaking hits. Most of the time when I'm reviewing an IEM, I'm listening to a song for like testing purposes, right? But with the Carmen, I was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna enjoy the music. Because similar to the original EJ07s, the Carmen took me on a whole ass musical journey, but the experience this time was way more intimate and personal with the artist. So close that it feels like I'm taking like a glimpse inside their soul or something. Especially when it comes to sadder ballads, because the Carmen portrays the vocals so clearly, they're so forward, so like vulnerable with no emotions getting hidden or missed, that you hear all the pain from the artist's voice, and it really takes the emotionality and the musicality to a next level. It's almost like you hear the story behind the song now, you understand the meaning behind the lyrics and the layer and the theme of the music. You just feel connected to the music on a very emotional level, which 99% of IEMs cannot do. I made a list of tracks that is the perfect demographic for the Carmen, and if you like those tracks or you know artists that are similar to the ones on the list, then just stop watching and just go buy the Carmen, crank them up, and have a nice cry. Now for those who own the OG EJ07s, don't worry, you don't need to sell them. The Carmen is a great complementary set to those. It's not going to be redundant because they're fairly different in the sound presentation, but also similar in the way that they scale and the immersion factor. The main difference is that the Carmen is fuller. It specializes in the vocals. The vocals are more forward. You hear the vocals better. It's a lot more intimate and personal with the music, as well as having better mid-bass and imaging when it comes to the overall sound. The EJ07s, on the other hand, are cleaner. They're sweeter. They're airier in the treble. It has more treble extension. It's more spacious in the staging and the presentation, and it's overall just more laid back. It's not as intimate with the vocals. The vocals aren't as good on the EJ07s, but it does have better layering and just better for rock and instrumental stuff. Resolution detail wise, they're around the same, but just highlighting different regions, and both are quote-unquote endgame scaling sets. Now personally, I like the fuller, more vocal centric sound on the Carmen, but the EJs have its own spot for rock and again instrumentals. And then versus the OG Dark Magicians, after being the vocals on the DM with the Carmen, the DM actually feels a bit off-centered compared to the Carmen. The vocals are a bit too high vertically and not as centered as the Carmen, and the extension, the clarity, and the detail in the vocals are just a step up on the Carmen while being more powerful and also just, if not more immersive as the Dark Magician.
Move this man!
Now stage-wise, the DM does feel wider with more air. Things are more pushed back, but not as laid back as the EJ, so it's kind of in between the Carmen, which is very intimate, and the EJs, which is like very spacious. And the mid-bass on the Dark Magician is also around the same level as the Carmen, which is really good, but overall imaging, layering, resolution goes over to the Carmen. It's just slightly better. As an analogy, if the stage on the EJs are like standing in front of a stadium, then the DM is like standing in front of people performing at a bar, and then the Carmen would be like they're performing right in front of your face. Now of course some people might think this is too close, like too intimate, but I really love this presentation, especially when it comes to the vocals. And even though I would take the Carmen over both the EJs and the original Dark Magician because I just love the vocals, it just does the vocals better. It doesn't mean that the original EJs and the original DMs are outdated now, because they're still unique in their own ways. Basically, the Carmen is going to be a set that if you love it, you're gonna love it. But if you don't, you're gonna start graph sniffing and be like, why does it come with a $2 pouch? So again, before you buy it, go check out the song list to get a better feel for what you're getting yourself into. Again, high volume blasting, and watch out for unit variations because my unit does look very different than HBB's in the treble, which affects the overall sound a lot. So I don't know what's going on there, but I do hope that YANYIN sticks out with my version of the tuning that's a lot more unique and not, you know, the boring another Dunu SA6 that's like HBBs. But yeah, pretty insane how this just came out of nowhere. Like the boys at YANYIN really did not give a F when it came to the accessories and the packaging. They were just like, fuck it, we're just gonna do what we do. And I can kind of respect that, but again, I'm not justifying their decision. So even though the Carmen is probably gonna be my favorite set that came out in 2024, I do still recommend demoing it because depending on how your library is and how like it vibes with your HRTF, it might be just like a dud to you, right? So go demo it or like at least have the chance to tour it first. But aside from that, hope this review was helpful. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see everyone soon. Shout out to Rarks Cat, Dom Q, Star Buccaneers, Discall Scaldus, B_Urac, Mystic Spoon Attack, Oh Really, Walker Standard, User, Ernest, Contain Guava Juice Gain, Patrick, Bellcell Kel, Polly J, Mr. Gorillas, Anton Risto, Gis Sang Yan, Tamat Pat Frachet, Ed Dunlap, Christopher Jackson, Name, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777ZK, Ben Thompson, Franco Gomez, Hegu55, Asher, Wizard, Jab, Osvaldo, and I Comment 87. Thank you guys so much for the support.